of the UN Resident Coordinator, Ambassador Edward Callon, he is sending his greetings. He has another assignment. Honorable Ministers, distinguished representatives of UN Tourism, members of the Women in Tourism Leadership in Africa Committee, development partners, private sector leaders, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to ride on already established protocols. It is a great honor to stand in front of you today and for me to join you on behalf of UN Women at the second UN Tourism Regional Congress on Women Empowerment in Tourism in Africa. I think as women in tourism, this is a great milestone. I think you need to clap your hands for yourselves for showing up and for being here today. I extend a sincere appreciation to the government of Zimbabwe and to UN Tourism for convening this important gathering here in Victoria Falls, a destination that reflects both Africa's tourism potential and the leadership opportunity that women across the continent are ready to claim. We are meeting today at a decisive moment for tourism and for women's economic empowerment in Africa. Tourism remains one of the continent's most important engines for employment and inclusive growth. And women are at the backbone of this sector. As women, we account for approximately 70% of the hospitality workforce in Africa. That's a huge milestone, but I think we need to dive deeper. Where are we within the 70%? And I think this is the importance of this international conference. Despite providing 70% representation in the sector, we remain concentrated in the informal, low-paid, insecure roles with limited influence over policy, investment decisions, and sector governance. So this conference is challenging us to say we need to change the structural composition in the tourism sector. We need to see more women coming up and accounting in the decision-making spaces where we can make greater impact and also begin to realize better benefits as women. This imbalance highlights a structural reality. Women sustain the tourism economy, but we seldomly shape its direction or benefit equitably from its growth. We have the Global Report on Women in Tourism, which also supports these statistics. They indicated that almost 54% of the women are in the tourism sector. But again, even in the global reports, we find most women in the lowly paid, insecure roles, and with a lot of men in the higher paying roles in the sector. And this challenge mirrors broader patterns across the private sector. UN Women's Baseline Survey on Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment within the private sector in Zimbabwe. Again, we have a very big tourism sector in Zimbabwe. And we realize that only 20% of the chief executive officer positions in the tourism sector and just 25% of board directorships are held by women. In traditionally male-dominated sector, we find that we find very few women there. Even where gender policies exist, enforcement remains weak, and women supply just 28% of the goods and services which are procured by corporates and demonstrating persistent barriers to market access and value chain participation. We are saying, what does this future hold? We want to envision a future where we see more women being represented in leadership positions, where women are also the key players in the tourism value chain, and where they are also making sure that tangible benefits are also being given to women. And these realities underscore why this Congress is so critical. Empowerment that stops at participation is insufficient. Access to employment and entrepreneurship must translate into power, leadership, and voice. You are here because your voice matters. Let's go beyond just participation. I was in Victoria Falls. What did you achieve? What did you push for on the agenda? I think if we can find ourselves articulating and also accounting for the voices and the influence that would have pushed, that would be great. UN Women's global evidence shows that women hold only 30% of managerial positions worldwide and continue to face a gender wage gap of approximately 20%. And at the current pace, if nothing is done, it will take more than 140 years to achieve equal representation of women in positions of power and leadership in the workforce. The cost of inaction is immense, and global gender inequality in lifetime earnings is estimated to have erased US 160 trillion in wealth. We cannot afford as women to remain standing aside. So this Congress marks a strategic shift in response to these structural challenges. Building on the foundations laid in Accra in 2019 and Freetown in 2024, the second regional Congress deliberately moves from empowerment towards leadership and institutional authority. And your vision is strongly aligned with SDG 5 on gender equality, the UN Women's Strategic Plan 2026 to 29, and the UN Tourism Agenda for Africa Tourism for Inclusive Growth, which is recognizing that gender equality is not only a social goal, but a prerequisite for sustainable economic transformation. The four thematic pillars that are guiding the Congress speak directly to the evidence. Policy and structural reform are essential to embed gender equality into national tourism strategies. Through gender mainstreaming, gender-responsive budgeting, and sex disaggregate data, we need to continue to gather the evidence and answer the so what question. What are the implications of inaction? What are the implications of continuing with the status quo? I think the data is showing us we need to act, and we need to act now, and this is very important. Capacity building and mentorship are critical to dismantling the leadership gap. By creating formal pathways for women to advance into executive and decision-making roles. UN Women's Global Reporting shows that closing the digital gender divide could also benefit hundreds of millions of women and add more than 1.5 trillion to the global economy. For women to engage meaningfully in the tourism sector, we need money, we need resources, we need the networks. And I hope that's what we are going to push for as the female delegates in this Congress. You need something that is tangible, something that is solid to be put on the table so that you can contribute meaningfully. We are realizing that as UN women, the current financial instruments and even the current procurement policies, they are skewed towards our male counterparts. But I think we need to go beyond what needs to be done so that we can also benefit equally and we can also contribute meaningfully. UN Women strongly welcomes the strengthened role envisioned for the Women in Tourism Leadership Africa Committee. A coordinated and credible advocacy platform is essential to ensure women's leadership perspective from informed tourism policies at national, regional, and continental levels, including engagement with the African Union and the development partners. As UN Women, we are calling on governments, including the government of Zimbabwe, to institutionalize gender equality within tourism policies, budgets, and governance frameworks. We want financial institutions to expand investment in women-led enterprises, and on the private sector to open leadership pipelines, boardrooms, and procurement systems to women. We also urge women and young leaders to claim their leadership space with confidence. Africa's future tourism will not be defined by how many women work in the sector, but by how many women are leading in the sector. The UN Tourism Group, they have their global flagship. I was talking to my other colleagues from the UN Tourism Group, and they say they've launched the Center Stage program in 5 countries. But we are yet to see the Center Stage program being launched in Africa. And I think we welcome as Zimbabwe to be one of the pilot countries to roll out this global flagship program. We want to focus on capacity building for gender equality in the tourism sector. Let us leave Victoria Falls not only inspired, but accountable. Advancing from empowerment to leadership requires political will, evidence-based action, and sustained partnership. As UN Women, we stand ready to work with UN Tourism, governments, the private sector, and women leaders across Africa to ensure that the outcomes of this Congress translate into lasting structural change. Together, we can ensure that women's leadership becomes a driving force for inclusive and sustainable tourism development across the continent. I thank you.